Welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. As loved ones of first responders and military personnel, we often face life situations and challenges that many others don't experience. And while each of us and our experiences are unique, together we can learn from one another and become stronger in this journey of life. Now let's step out of mediocrity. It's time to thrive. This is the last episode for the podcast Suicide Prevention Awareness series, and I brought on Steve Jensen, who has experience as being a chaplain and just in the military in general and just grieving. And he provides a lot of insight on how we can help our friends, our families, our community after a suicide is completed. So I'm excited for today's episode. I think this is really good information for us because so often we just think, let's prevent suicide. But you know what? It happens, and we need to know how we can help each other through this circumstance. So let's get on to the interview with Steve. Hi, Waiting Warriors. Welcome to another episode for this Suicide Prevention Awareness Month series. Today we have an important guest, Steve Jensen. Hi, Steve, and welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. I don't think I've ever been called an important guest before, but
You are. You have knowledge to share.
well, I mean, it's good to be here. So I'm, like you said, I'm Steve Jensen. I'm an active duty Air Force chaplain. I've been a chaplain for just over 2 years, but I've been in the Air Force for over 11. And I'm married. I've got 3 kids. I've got a teenager and then a preteen. And then one that's 8, so she's still somewhat sane. But yeah, we've got 3 girls, and we're stationed at Beale Air Force Base in California.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
your experience in a nutshell. So you've been in the Air Force, now you're as a chaplain. From both perspectives and jobs, what has been your experience with suicide awareness and prevention?
So before becoming a chaplain, my experience with it was, any military member has sat through several suicide prevention awareness briefs, and I mean they hit it with you so much that you start to think, oh man, I'm not going to kill myself. Why am I sitting here listening through this?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it often comes off as disingenuine, because it comes across as, hey, don't kill yourself, at least while you're here with us. If you're going to do it, do it after you move somewhere else. And it's not our problem, because it's something like, if prevention is going to be done effectively, it's really just reaching out, connecting with people. And if your command is telling you, hey, no, we care about you, but then their actions show otherwise, then you think, oh, you don't want me to create work for you by killing myself.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's really not the case, but that's just how it comes across, just from all the overexposure. So the military is very, very aware of suicide prevention, but as far as what to actually do if it happens, or how to really connect with people, it's still work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've seen the devastating effects that suicide can have on a family, just in my own family, and it's hard. It takes grieving to a new level.
Yeah. So my understanding is that you've researched and even developed some material on suicide postvention care. Could you first tell me more about what suicide postvention is? Because that was a term that I had not heard before. So what is suicide postvention?
So the word postvention is a term that was coined by Edwin Schneidman. He's considered the father of suicide studies in the modern era. So, back in like 1969, 1970, somewhere around that time, he came up with the word postvention as a form of prevention for further suicides after someone does kill themselves, because it's kind of what do you do once it happens? Because although it would be a nice goal to have zero suicides in our society, zero suicides in the military, the likelihood of that actually happening is, pretty low. But once it does happen, like I said, with the suicide awareness being very high in the military, I'd seen cases where it did happen, and this is all pre-chaplain days, when it did happen, and it just seemed like everyone was scrambling and like, oh no, it happened. The thing we never wanted to happen happened. Now what do we do? And there wasn't really a rule book for them to follow, and how to connect with the family afterwards, and how to communicate with the unit members who were just, it didn't, it happened on one of the bases I was at, and I wasn't even, the guy wasn't even in the same unit as me, but it just the fact that it happened on our base. One of our brothers and sisters was hurting so much that they went and killed themselves. It impacts everybody. And then to have the command not really, seemingly not really given tools of what to do or say and how to treat it, because they're like, well, we don't want to talk too much about it, because then we'll be planting these seeds of suicide, then we'll just have a chain of suicides, because everyone's thinking, oh, it's a viable way to get out, because we don't want to aggrandize it. So how do we memorialize our airmen and the fact that they did wear a uniform without drawing attention to how they died? And it just piqued my interest of what we do, because I'm idealistic that we can get rid of more suicides, but I'm also realistic to know that you're not going to be able to get it 100%. And so I thought, well, what can we do when it does happen?
Right. So what did you learn in all of your studies?
Well, so I think I don't say my viewpoint changed on suicide, but I think I came to some people, they're just going to do it, and there's nothing that you can do about it. They're just hell bent on killing themselves, and there's nothing that anybody's going to do to change that. Because I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's like 1 in 4, 1 in 3 suicides. There's no warning signs. No, they don't leave a note or anything. They pack up their desk at work and then go home and, commit the act. And nobody saw it coming. And so, that's going to happen. But I'm going to say my viewpoint on suicide, I don't say it changed, but I think it evolved a little bit. And what I mean by that is that, I guess beforehand, I just saw it as this outright, completely devastating event. But the more I studied about it, the more I saw it as, I saw a lot more grace involved with it. And people have problems. As long as there's people, there's people problems. But through human suffering, we have an opportunity to connect with one another, to reach out to one another, and to be more Christ-like, if you will, with one another. And I guess I just saw suicide more of just another example of human suffering. I didn't view it any longer as like this the worst thing that could ever happen, because I think there's meaning in life, but there's also meaning in death. And I don't think life ends when we pass from this world. And so I guess it just gave me more compassion for others that were suffering in different ways. So I know that's probably not the normal thing that you would expect me to get out of reading a bunch and studying a bunch about suicide, but that is probably the primary thing that I got from it.
No, but that's a good thing for us who haven't taken the time to study to learn, though. I think it's an unexpected but important lesson that we can learn from what you learned in the time you've taken to study. So,
It could also mean just that I'm a weirdo and that I think of things in weird ways.
weird thoughts are
Abstract
good
thinker.
thoughts. That's good for us non-abstract thinkers. We need the abstract. So, postvention with suicide, what do we as a community need to know about how to handle a suicide or how to help? Um, does that question make sense? Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, what should we be doing?
So I think there's in our society there's a huge stigma associated with suicide, and
Mm-hmm.
I think in some ways that's a learned behavior in a way, and it's influenced by our worldview and how we think about things. I mean, for example, in Japan, they like with the Bushido code for the samurai warriors, it was actually seen as an honorable thing to take your own life, and there was a whole ceremony,
Oh.
surrounding it. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not saying, oh yeah, we should just kill ourselves if we've been dishonored or acted dishonorably or whatever. But I think that because of the stigma of, oh, their loved one died by suicide, and I don't know how to talk about it differently, but really, a loss is a loss. Someone dies, to a degree, it doesn't really matter too much how their loved one died, because the same fact remains that
Mm-hmm.
their loved one died. So you should talk with somebody the same way that you would, regardless of how they died. Now, I understand that we don't always know what to say, and I've studied a lot about grief and death. And when I talk to an airman or anybody whose loved one has died, and I find myself even at a loss for words of what to say. And I've experienced loss, but I think back, I don't know what I needed to hear either. But I think
Mm-hmm.
what we can do, like we don't have to have like the perfect thing to say. It's more about who a being than saying. Because I look back to, our son died about 9 years ago, and I didn't remember a whole lot of what anybody was saying to me, but I remembered how I felt and how people made me feel by how they treated me and connected with me and my family and served us. So I think that's the biggest thing to do. If you know somebody whose whose loved one has died by suicide, just treat them how you'd want to be treated. And if you're just going to give them lip service, then maybe it's better not to say anything, but just being be a friend. And that's something we can all do. You don't have to be a chaplain to be a friend.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me think of my mom. I don't remember who passed away or what, but I know it was an
Uh huh.
unexpected loss. But I remember watching her write a note saying, "There are no words. I wish there was something I could do to make it better, but I just want you to know I'm thinking of you." And she wrote the note and she sent it. And I I loved that because I'm the type of person that I
Yeah.
like to fix things, and I get really frustrated when I can't fix things. I I just really hate it that I can't say something to fix it, but that was a good lesson, and I continue to reflect on that. Like, sometimes if you are a praying person, the best thing you can do is to just pray for them and let them know that you're praying for them. Or, like, sometimes we just can't fix it, but we
Yeah.
can be
No,
their
that's
friend.
that's very well said, and a good message for military, because I mean we're fixers.
Yeah, so it's like I know we can't do that, and for my personality that's really frustrating.
Hmm.
But I think it's important that, and again, I'm talking mostly to people who are like me because I need to know this, but
Hmm.
it's not about what I'm comfortable with. It's not, and what I want to do, it's what they need. And one other example that I really liked,
Hmm.
there's a podcast that I really like to listen to, and her brother
Hmm.
and sister-in-law lost their baby. Like, it was a year old or something and passed away. And all she said was, she's like, there really isn't anything I can say, but she just felt the need to acknowledge that it had happened, and that
Yeah.
that person just like a little, to memorialize it a little bit, because there isn't anything we can say to fix it, but just to acknowledge that that grief and pain is there, like
Hmm.
an I see you type of a thing. I think that can go a long ways as well.
No, I agree. I think it's a great message for a military audience, especially because we're fixers, we're doers. I mean, the Air Force is a culture of checklists. You have a checklist for everything. But sometimes you just have to take a step back and realize that you can't you can't change it. I mean, I used to be aircrew before I was a chaplain, and we would mission plan just for hours. Before we'd go fly. You know, what if this radio doesn't work? What if this person doesn't take off? What if the airspace isn't available? Whatever. Every contingency, we would always say, hope is not a plan. You can't not plan and then hope everything works out. But in life,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hope is the only plan. You do all that you can, but then you find out that there's nothing else you can do. So you just have to hope that things will work out. And I think that's why we have faith, because faith is all about hope.
Yeah, that really is beautiful. It's a beautiful thought. Okay, I think the most important question for this interview is, what should people not do?
What should people not do? Well, don't kill
Mm-hmm.
yourself. I think
Right,
that's the point of this, right? Just um,
right. But from a postvention side, what should we? Whether it's you're the commander's wife, or even just non-military, for the first responders, like for those loved ones, like somebody else in your circle has lost somebody, what should we
mhm.
not?
um, I mean, this is just me. This is what I think, and like all
Mhm.
this stuff that I've been saying is it's not the Air Force that's speaking. This is all just me. But
Oh, I thought you were the official.
I know, right? No, they don't trust me with stuff like that.
Oh,
But I would say don't embrace the stigma. That's what I would say is the number one thing not to do, because there's a huge
okay.
stigma about suicide, and you know don't don't alienate somebody because you don't understand what they're going through. I mean, they're going to have to grieve on their own timetable. Um, and there's when someone dies by suicide, there's that extra complication to it, because there's so many unanswered questions. I mean, there's unanswered questions when someone dies, regardless. But when then someone dies and it's not just by suicide, because you can have people that die from an accident or homicide. There's just all these, oh, what if I would have done this? What if I would have been there? So don't just think, oh, I don't know what to say, and so I mean, I care about them, but I don't want to say the wrong thing, and so I'm just going to avoid them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you care about somebody, then go out of your way to show them that you do care about them. Don't just don't just alienate them, because they're already alienated enough. Because I mean, when you lose somebody, you're just you're just numb, because you can't feel anything. Like your whole world just gets turned upside down, and so you need some stability. You need somebody that will reach out to you and show that they actually care about you. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, don't embrace the stigma and don't avoid them.
Okay. Do you have any, I guess, a deeper explanation or examples of how we cannot embrace the stigma?
Um, I mean, I guess one obvious thing would be, like, if you're a person of faith and it's someone else from you're not from your faith community, and you personally believe that suicide's the worst thing that person can do, and that their family member is rotting in hell, I would
Oh,
avoid voicing that to your friend and telling them that their loved one is in hell. So that's one. one example that comes to mind of not embracing the stigma.
Yeah.
Even if you do think that their loved one is in hell for their actions, I would hold off on sharing that with them, like ever.
Oh, geez. Yes. It's like even if you think it's the biggest sin in the world, you're still not perfect yourself.
Yeah, and there's plenty of examples of that, and that's just one of our human conditions. We we think that because we're knowledgeable about something that gives us the right to judge others. But I mean, at least from where I stand, I'm not the judge of anybody. Judge not, lest you be judged. So yeah, just treat other people like you want to be treated. Golden rule is a great thing. It can be applied to so many different situations in life, and this is one of them.
Yeah. And I guess that is so interesting that we just with suicide we forget that. For some reason our society is just so built to turn off when a suicide happens. Like everything we normally do, a way we normally try to approach a situation, for some reason it's so different with suicide.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, but because of it, that's it leads to complicated grief in some cases. And if it happens in the military, which is it's a tight knit community anyway. I mean, some of the
Mhm.
relationships you have with other military members that you deploy with, you're on a crew with, you see them more than your own family a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so some of those, I mean, I look at some of my buddies from the military, and my relationship with them is closer to a sibling than anything else, because you're all
Mm-hmm.
away from home. You're all that's the family that you have. And so when a suicide happens, it rips apart your family. And then if everything just gets glossed over, like, oh, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to acknowledge that it happened, it leaves a lot of, there's not as much closure for the
Mm.
for the family, because you become a forgotten griever. Like it becomes someone else's loss, even though here this person was that was part of your family. It's now the person's other family. It's their loss, not yours. That's how it kind of seems to be viewed.
Interesting. So interesting. Well, do you have any last words of wisdom? And it can be on suicide, postvention, or not.
Last words of wisdom. I don't know if I had any words of wisdom this whole time, but
No, it's good.
I guess just treat people the way you want to be treated. And
Mm-hmm.
um and then when someone does die by suicide, just treat people with love and compassion, and don't think, well, I don't know this person well enough, or I mean, who am I to make a difference? You know, we really can make a difference. Um, don't never underestimate your power as a neighbor, or even even just a casual friend, to have a great impact on someone else. I was listening to a religious talk the other day, and the speaker used this analogy of he'd gone on a walk, and he'd seen a sidewalk that was cracked. And sidewalk made out of concrete, it's a very very strong material, and it would take a lot to crack a sidewalk. But he looked at why it was cracked, and a root from the nearby tree had grown underneath it. And if you measured the amount of force that the root was impacting on that piece of concrete, you know, on a daily or even a weekly or monthly basis, you wouldn't really be able to measure it. But over time, it had a great impact on what it did to that sidewalk. So, I mean, I think the point of the talk was small and simple things can make great things come to pass. And that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're talking with other people who have experienced loss of really any kind, or just people that are sad. There's sadness in a lot of different areas of life. We talk about grief, and it, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, loss of anything. You're going to experience the same family of emotions. So, and suicide is just another area. And so never underestimate the impact you can have on somebody. So I guess that would be my, maybe word of wisdom, points to ponder.
No, I like it.
But I tell that to airmen all the time, because I'm like, you don't have to be a chaplain to be a friend or a wingman to somebody. So never underestimate the power that you have as a supervisor, as just a fellow airman. You have the power to impact someone else's life, so use it.
That's awesome. That's awesome last words of wisdom.
Yeah, you can tell my wife that every once in a while I say something that's no, I'm just kidding. It's really my kids. It's really my kids that wouldn't believe it.
Well, this podcast will be like saved forever. So in however many years, when they're more able to be convinced, you can say, see, I think it's right here.
Yeah.
It's right here. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I have learned a lot. I have thought of things in a way I haven't thought of. So I'm sure that will help other listeners out there.
Yeah, I hope so. If not, there's always a delete button.
Yeah. Just go on to the next episode.
Yeah, skip.
Okay, well, thanks again, Steve.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much for being so involved and supportive with the Suicide Prevention Awareness Month series of the podcast. Please remember, share these episodes. Take a quick screenshot of your phone and share it on Instagram, Facebook. Just get this information out there so we can help more people have awareness. We can know how to prevent this and know how to react appropriately when things happen with kind, loving hearts. Thank you guys again so much, and I'll talk to you next week.